Africa's great primary forest is a world of its own. It's the largest reserve of wildlife on the entire dark continent. Under a canopy of trees hundreds of years old, every rustle, every scent, every sound is perceptible. The living world has struck a perfect balance. From the tiniest insect to the largest mammal, from those that lurk in the shadows to those that thrive in the sunlight, they all depend upon each other for their development and have since time began. Among these creatures live humans, pygmies, whom today we call indigenous peoples. These nomadic hunter-gatherers are part of the one large whole formed by the infinite diversity of the forest. But the real pillars supporting this one-of-a-kind structure are the trees, with names such as Limba, Okume, Sipo, or Sapeli. Over 4,000 indigenous plant species form the wealth of this enormous, ancient woodland. With its 2 million square kilometers, the Great African Primary Forest spans more than 6 countries in the Congo River Basin. It's our planet's second largest green lung after the Amazon rainforest. And like it, the African rainforest harbors tropical timber, a crucial source of revenue and jobs for the livelihood of its inhabitants. Yet massive exploitation is shrinking it bit by bit. However, in the north of the Congo Republic lies a forest concession that stands apart. Here, far from the capital city of Brazzaville, people endeavor to make the impossible happen. Imagine an exploitation concerned with profitability that nevertheless respects the balance of the rainforest's ecosystems and its people's culture. A challenge that forces professionals to reinvent their tasks on a daily basis, to face up to the myriad surprises the great forest has in store for them. This concession, nearly 2 million hectares, is a genuine laboratory. The success or failure of the project could transform man's relationship to forests for decades to come. The Congo Republic has decided to rewrite a new pact with the forest. On one side of this road is a timber concession of over 1 million hectares. On the other, Odzala National Park. Logging operations employ eco-guards to watch over both domains and allow animals to move about freely, both in the park and in logging zones. This morning, a patrol of eco-guards has been alerted to the presence of a small band of poachers on the edge of the park. The fight against poaching is always #1 on the agenda. Because in the pacified Republic of Congo, trafficking and detrimental common practices are a threat not only to animal species, but to the equilibrium of the entire forest. New weapons and the organization of international networks have turned hunting into nothing short of a pillage. Hunted for its tusks that fuel the illegal ivory trade, the forest elephant is in grave danger of extinction. 60% of elephants in the Congo Basin have been killed within the past 10 years.
Elephant trail.
Yet elephants play a fundamental role in the ecosystem.
You're going to see tracks there. When an elephant walks, it leaves behind fecal matter composed of fruit from trees like the sapeli and sipo. After a rainfall, the dung produces a recolonization of trees. That's why after an elephant passes through an area where there were no sapele trees, you find that after a year or even 6 months, as soon as it rains, there are new tree sprouts growing in the elephant's dung.
A little further on, the eco-guards discover a metal snare, a device that's been outlawed. The team has been trained in ambush techniques and attempt to catch the poachers red-handed.
On your knees, on your knees.
Sorry, Chief. Sorry, Chief. Sorry. Sorry. Sorry, Chief.
Hands in the air. Hands in the air. Are there wires in there? Metal wires get a lot of game. They impoverish the forest because there are some people who lay between 500 to 1,000 wires. 1,000 wires in the forest. Sometimes you find animals that are already starting to decompose. The putrid stench frightens away the other animals. Little by little, the animals flee far into the forest. That's why the use of metal wires has been outlawed.
These hunters aren't big poachers. They get off with a simple warning, and of course their traps are destroyed. Logging operations actively fight against poaching. But their ambition reaches much further. Today, in the north of the Congo Republic, a handful of operations are committed to using new logging techniques. These pioneering lumber factories have agreed to meet the constraints of equitable and reasonable exploitation, as defined by a label called FSC. Eco-Guard patrols are part of this system. They're employed by the logging operations themselves and are one of the first requirements for obtaining the FSC label. The man who put this certification into place in the Congo Basin is named Mathieu Auger Schwarzenberg.
FSC means Forest Stewardship Council, a council that supervises and manages forests. It's kind of like a 21st century witness and guardian of the forests. It's an NGO that was created just after the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. It's an impetus toward better forest management, because we're talking about the logging industry, but with less environmental impact and something that's socially beneficial for local and indigenous populations that live in and depend on the forest.
Environmentally respectful forest management also means an incredible advantage for the economy of the Congo Republic. It opens up new markets in Europe, where some countries require this type of label before they will import any timber onto their soil.
Naturally, cutting down a tree has an impact on the environment. With the FSC, this impact is greatly reduced. That's where it's reduced the most. But it's true that when you cut down a tree, there is an impact, though it does create jobs and a dynamic. And finally, where forest managers are most important in the Congo Basin is in their relationship with the state on the one hand, but also with the indigenous populations living in these concessions, because they were here long before, and they'll be here long after.
Loggers in the Congo must reach a compromise with an element that is unique in all the world: the native peoples of the forest, formerly known as pygmies. They've lived here for thousands of years, and for them, the forest is more than a simple environment. It's a fertile breeding ground that also provides them with clothing, shelter, medicine, and food. They climb trees to harvest honey, caterpillars, and leaves. They know which roots to use as pain reliever or insect repellent. They recognize every plant and every animal sound. They've learned to make use of every level of the forest. The camps of these nomadic hunter-gatherers are short-lived, made of cleverly assembled sticks and leaves. Every detail of their lives has been adapted to the forest. Environmentally respectful logging requires that special attention be paid to the needs of local communities. A mission that can prove highly complex, because the people of the forest share the land with another indigenous group living along the paths, the Bantu. The Bantu are widespread throughout Africa and tend to dominate the other peoples. Every decision must first go through them. Here, in this village, the two communities live side by side. Mathieu Auger-Schwarzenberg accompanies the social communicators dispatched by the logging operations. Together, they hope to create the best possible relationship with the local population, whose opinion will directly influence the logging project.
I won't be working directly with you. The FSC doesn't work directly with the local people. That's why you'll hardly ever see me. It's Mr. Eric, who represents IFO, along with his entire highly competent social team, who will come to work with you. But in a certain capacity, my organization and I are there to guarantee that if they want to continue working according to our rules and principles, your rights must be known within the framework of their activity.
To gain a better understanding of the village's different points of view, the communicators have them draw a map on the ground that indicates all the zones they feel are important.
This is a very effective way of opening up communication with the people. It's the moment when the company explains the rights of use to local and indigenous peoples, their conditions of access to the land. This is when they discuss the restrictive conditions of an agreement between them. So it's also the critical moment when the people realize they have the right to refuse operations if they don't want them. There are very few companies in the Congo Basin that use this type of dialogue and exchange with the people. These maps are faithfully reproduced by computer and a large number printed up. Then we head out to check the mapping done on the computer with the people out in the field to make sure that there are no mistakes. Only after this whole process of negotiation, discussion, and exchange, only then can the company begin logging in the area. It takes about a month. How long are you going to spend out in the field? A good month in the village, taking measurements out in the forest. The indigenous peoples are the lords of the forest here. They're the ones who can name the trees. Actually, all logging operations employ indigenous people to count their timbers. I'm incapable of naming more than 20 trees out in the forest, and I've spent 13 years here. I dare you to find anyone, besides 1 or 2 Europeans, who can name more than 20 over the course of their entire lifetime. Because it's easy to recognize a board, but much harder to recognize a tree because we can't see its leaves. You have to know how to recognize it on the ground, but we don't know the barks. It's a science that they've mastered for thousands of years. The only thing we've done is put a name on the wood they've known for generations on end.
After the meeting in the main village, it's time to venture into the heart of the forest. Sensitive zones such as rivers and streams, inhabited areas or areas reserved for hunting must be mapped out in order to be protected. The rivers are easy, but the nomadic camps are harder to locate since they change with the seasons. It's up to the social communicators to gather the most accurate information possible from the communities living here. Emerson, Indépendant, and Pascal strike out to meet a few isolated indigenous families. Their camp is about an hour's walk from the nearest path. In the Congo, it's estimated nearly 30,000 people live in the forest most of the year. Indépendant himself comes from an indigenous community. As a child, he went to the school built by the logging operation and was later trained to become a social communicator.
Anybody home? Here we are. Hello. 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 No need for introductions because now we know each other. We are working on development and planning. You are the indigenous population of Mbanza. When we want to log, the inhabitants of the village of Mbanza must be informed of the activity we want to carry out in their zone. Considering we're at least 30 kilometers from the original villages of Mbanza here. But the inhabitants of Mbanza come here sometimes to attend to their business, like collecting food. We were told we could find them in the encampments. So we follow them where they go, to work with them, because they're the ones who master these forest areas. We're going to work with this new device. I'll explain how it works.
To better grasp the population's needs, a tool was developed to compile the map of trees that need protecting. Since they can't read, they use touchscreen illustrations to identify the role the trees play in their daily life. Dietary, medicinal, or spiritual. It's now time to choose who will accompany the social communicators out into the forest. The best hunters and gatherers in the village.
When we, the planning and development services, arrive in the villages, the village people really help us out. The whole goal of the mission is to protect what belongs to them. There are many different trees in the forest, but they know which ones have caterpillars and which ones they go to for worship. Which tree is used for which particular activity. We're in a spot that used to be an encampment. We buried children here, and on the other side there used to be a village. So together with them, we identify these places and the sacred trees. You might come to a tree that has good wood, but since it's important, it's protected for the people.
The small group points out a tree with an impressive-looking trunk, a sapeli. This tree houses a precious dietary resource for the indigenous people.
They said it's a tree that has caterpillars, so we automatically have to save it for them, for their people.
The caterpillars feed on sapelli leaves and are easy to harvest. They're a rich source of protein, minerals and vitamins, the most nourishing edible insect in the world. It's thus vital that the trees they live in be preserved for the people. The tree is marked with paint. There'll be no cutting permitted for a radius of 100 meters around it. There are countless reasons to protect the trees. Because they house caterpillars or honeybees, or else because their leaves, like those of the coconut, are essential for food preparation. Or else because their bark is a crucial ingredient in traditional medicines. Each tree selected by the indigenous people is catalogued along with its variety, function, and GPS coordinates.
This is a mokolongo. It's a medicinal tree, and it plays a very important role in the health of the locals here. It treats hemorrhoids and back pain. It's important for the indigenous people. That's why they've asked us to protect it.
The indigenous people have decided to protect a total of about 50 trees near their nomadic village. The need to confer directly with those affected by the exploitation of the forest seems obvious, yet the practice is still too rare. Only a handful of operations in the north of Congo have grasped how essential this dialogue truly is. Bokonji, the spirit of the forest, makes an appearance during the celebration thrown in honor of the three social communicators, as if he too wanted to show how he protects his people and trees.
As you can imagine, we'll be spending the night here. To put it plainly, that means we're welcome here. That's what we mean by permanent contact with the people. That's why you see us dancing with them.
It's not just the trees that benefit from protection. The dialogue with the people has revealed another concern. The need to preserve a 350 square kilometer zone around the village of Mbomu. Because this is where one of the largest gorilla populations in all of Central Africa is to be found. Magdalena Bermejo is a primatologist. For her, this heartfelt cry from the villagers has changed everything. Elsewhere, reserves are created without any input whatsoever from local communities. But here, it's the inhabitants themselves who've decided to use their ancestral lands to protect gorillas and stand up to logging operators.
Everyone was frightened in the village of Mbomo. They didn't let the logging prospectors through. I didn't ask them to do anything. It was their own initiative. They said, "We decided to do this. It's for research, to protect our animals. We know very well what they do when they cut down trees. We don't want any part of that."
Together, they developed ecotourism based on gorillas, an initiative that's even more remarkable due to the fact that these creatures are considered dangerous.
The villagers realized it was possible to approach the animals, that they didn't run away. They thought, that's impossible. If we follow a group of gorillas, the same one, as soon as they notice our presence, they're going to kill us. They understood the animals' behavior and what you had to do to observe them in the forest. We explained how habituation was a process that led to something bigger and more important, understanding the animals, studying them, trying to understand the dynamic and what elements they bring to the forest.
For Magdalena, this grassroots action is an opportunity that fosters her scientific work. She set up over 60 cameras in the forest to study the different behaviors of these great apes and their relationship to their environment.
They're very relaxed here. Each has its own feeding zone. But at first, if we look at this previous sequence, there's still movement. There's this individual that tries to approach the zone. The male informs it this is the spot where he's going to be. For 2 or 3 hours, the animals fed in this zone. And one after the other, we see how they all turn around the spot and who ousts whom. The group eats the roots of a specific variety of tree. They eat varieties here, and that's unique. There are no references to lowland gorillas in other study zones. They seek out roots that are deep in the ground.
The gorilla takes advantage of every level of the forest, even its cellar. By consuming leaves, fruits, and roots, it disperses seeds. Like the elephant, it grants a priceless favor to the ecosystem by contributing to its balance. But even if the overall gorilla population has increased over the past few years, they're still an endangered species.
I think we're on the right track, but there's still hunting. Poaching, that's a real conundrum for everyone. Maybe we'll manage to put an end to it for the gorillas. That'll depend on everyone's combined efforts. Over in the village of Mbomo, they're still waiting for tourists to come back. Have you seen a gorilla? Our forest is so beautiful. There's a lot more that needs to be done, but we're on the right track.
Once all the areas that need to be protected have been defined, the forestry workers prepare to take a gigantic inventory. Each tree for several thousands of hectares must be listed. Dozens of men are positioned over 100 or so meters, and parcel by parcel, they divide up the annual cutting area. In other words, the surface area that will be harvested in the following year. The goal of the mission is to identify each tree, measure it, and record its location.
Ok, compteur numéro 10. Quelle essence? Ok, numéro 89.
At the same time, thousands of GPS coordinates are transferred onto maps that will be used to plan the logging over a 35-year cycle. Each dot on the screen corresponds to a tree. Each variety is color-coded. Then the trees that the indigenous people have prohibited from cutting are removed, along with those that aren't yet big enough to be profitable. Among the remaining specimens, only 2 trees per hectare will be selected for cutting. That way, the forest can regenerate naturally. It's 5:30 a.m. After 2 hours on the trails, the felling crew finally arrives alongside the parcels to be logged. A tough day awaits. 50-some trees must be felled before it gets too hot, and they're overrun by bees. Thomas Britveg is foreman of the felling crew. He gives his final recommendations and makes sure the right trees are selected. The first one felled is a 60-meter tall sapelli with a diameter of nearly 2 meters.
The trees are so huge and towering here in Africa that we have a special technique. The first thing is to analyze the wood. Look at the natural felling direction the tree is going to fall in. Clear around the tree, make an escape trail so that you can get away from the base of the tree if someone gets hurt or an accident. Secondly, once you've analyzed the wood, you cut a notch to guide the direction it will fall in. Once you've done that, there's a whole cutting system to prepare before you. Like they say here in Africa, throw the tree to the ground.
No automated machine is capable of cutting through the oversized trunks of these trees that are hundreds of years old. So it's the expertise of the crews that ensure that they're felled in a manner that respects the rest of the forest. These loggers are the elite of the Congo's lumberjacks. They're reputed for the speed of their cutting and the smoothness of their lines. But one must beware of unforeseeable forces when dealing with trees of such heights.
Those sticks help the loggers see if the tree is moving. In other words, this stick here, when the tree's ready to go, it will lower down. We can't see up there with all that height. We can't see the tree move. Even if it moves 10 centimeters up there, down here it doesn't move. So this is what guides us. We can't look up at the top of the tree to see which side it's going to fall to. The antenna tells us that. If it goes down, tree's going the right way. If the antenna goes up, that means the tree wants to settle. There's a change in direction. We change our felling technique.
When the moment approaches for the giant to fall, the logger must warn the other lumberjacks of the imminent danger.
Here, the tree is making things a little complicated for us. It's dancing with us. First it goes right, then left, then forward, then backward. It's all cut. The problem is that the tree doesn't want to fall. So we've hit a critical moment, because the tree alone is going to decide where it wants to go. We're gambling. We're being led by the antennae we placed all around the tree. That's what we rely on and what guides us. They go down, go up, and... excuse me. Come on, come on! Let's go. Let's get out of here. Out you go.
A successful felling is one that leaves the trunk intact. In other words, without splitting the wood lengthwise. Each stump is marked with its number. The same number is stamped onto the trunk to ensure traceability from the sawmill back to the forest. This additional measure is a requirement of FSC certification, so inspections can be carried out by independent agents in the field. Once the parcel has been logged, it will be left to rest for 30 years, giving the forest time to regenerate. A felling operation such as this begins every January the 1st and concerns about 10,000 hectares over the year. With just 2 trees cut per hectare, that makes nearly 20,000 trees that are felled each year. The figures are certainly impressive, but from the sky, the forest still appears luxuriant despite the logging. With this practice, natural regeneration, in other words, the distribution of seeds and the rich soil of the substratum, are preserved. Once cut, the logs are directly transported to the sawmill in Pokola or Ngombe to be turned into lumber. This is where the timber is sorted for quality and divided up for export or the local market. The living standards of employees are closely monitored in companies bearing the FSC label, such as IFO or CIB. From now on, they must take into account the social dimension that was once lacking in these highly remote areas of the Congo Basin forest. This costs each company about 5 million euros per year out of a turnover of 40 million euros. Part of this 5 million goes into the local development fund, aimed at improving living standards, in other words, the well-being and basic needs of indigenous peoples in the forest. The village of Pokola is a shining example of the success of these forest settlements. 30 years ago, it was nothing but a forest encampment of 200 people. Today, it's an actual town of 13,000 that offers services, schools, and commerce. An annex economy founded on the logging industry. But the cornerstone of this social construction in the heart of the forest is health.
Through the help it provides to local populations, CIB has been obliged to create types of medical assistance, such as a medical clinic, which, in my opinion, is unique in the Republic of Congo, because it has forms of medical care that are rarely seen on the national level, but that we find here in Pokola. You can't deny that medical care, even if you have to pay for it, is symbolic in raising awareness among people in terms of their responsibility. Besides that, we've set up free access for local people living on CIB's concessions. And beyond that, CIB is involved in something called the Bwanga Project that brings medical care directly to people right in their encampments.
The Bwanga project, Bwanga meaning medicine in Benzele, the language of the hunter-gatherer people in the region, is based on the idea of a mobile pharmacy traveling throughout the forest. Twice a month, the doctor based in the Pokola clinic visits remote villages located far from the medical center. Accompanied by a native Benzele assistant acting as social coordinator, Marianne Remer comes to explain the importance of the Bwanga project.
Here we are.
How are you?
Besides a medicine chest, which will be left in the village, the healer who will be in charge of distributing the pharmaceutical drugs must be trained.
Ça c'est maman. Où est maman? Papi, maman.
Do you know this white woman?
Yes, we do. She works at the hospital.
She says she knows that you work at the hospital.
J'ai compris. Docteur de l'hôpital.
At the hospital, yeah.
We've come today to talk about the Bwanga project.
Before, the situation for indigenous people was really complicated. But now, since we've had the Bwanga project here in this area, it plays an important role because we have healers who are trained to go from one encampment to the next to help my people, whom you see, the natives. That's why this project was created. The indigenous lifestyle was taken into account because they're a nomadic population. Today, we have medical care thanks to the Bwanga project.
The array of pharmaceutical drugs contained in an airtight cask was specially thought out to step in where traditional medicine would fail. There's no question of ignoring the culture of traditional medicine that has proven its value in the majority of cases. But sometimes it doesn't work.
How long has he had diarrhea?
Science is used to reinforce treatment for diarrhea, intestinal parasites, dysentery, and malaria in particular.
This is the first time he's lost weight.
Since the healer can't read or write, pictographs on the packaging illustrate what each drug is for and its dosage.
Look here. This depicts a child with diarrhea. He takes one pill the first day, then another one the second day, and another pill the third day too. Did you see?
Yeah.
In the morning, one pill.
The training is essential because once the healthcare team returns to Pokola, the healer will head back into the forest on his own with the medicine chest.
Take this pill and put it in your mouth. Good. Chew it up. The child is too small to swallow it.
Almost all the children here have intestinal parasites. When they contract a disease, on top of that, malaria or diarrhea, their bodies are already weak. They often deteriorate quickly. So twice a year, we treat the entire village with albendazole, an antiparasitic drug.
Over the ages, the Umbenzeli have developed a healthcare system adapted to their environment. For thousands of years, these hunter-gatherers had the forest to themselves. But with the changes brought about by the industrial era, their traditional medicine is lacking when it comes to fighting the new onslaught of diseases. The people involved in the Bwanga project had to come up with a new system that was compatible with the nomadic lifestyle of the Umbenzeli, venturing into the heart of the forest and relying on healers from the same ethnic group. This is already a huge step for a people who love their forest and can't live without it, even if they are tempted to check out what's happening at the border of their idyllic world. Ensuring the well-being and basic needs of the people living in the forest while it's being logged is an obligation for the companies with FSC certification. But that's not all. IFO and CIB have obtained the right to exploit 2 million acres of forest for a period of 30 years. They must constantly look for ways of reducing their impact on the ecosystem. These researchers are part of the DYNA4 project, aimed at understanding exactly how the forest manages to regenerate after a logging operation. To measure the impact on biodiversity, Isaac Zombo and his team compared two strictly identical 400-hectare parcels, one of which is being logged, the other not.
The DYNA4 project is aimed at measuring tree growth. Normally, DYNA4's goal is to predict the future. We measure trees to anticipate the behavior of trees, how they evolve each year, and also so we can keep tabs on their mortality rates. Next, we have to identify each tree by its Latin name. In other words, its scientific name. This is a Strambosia grandifolia. That's what we'll put down on the list in our files.
29.5.
29.5.
The paint here is just to tell us where to measure when we come back next year, so we measure it at the same spots.
Each year, the researchers return to measure the growth rate of the trees. Through the comparative study of the two parcels, Isaac and his team are able to establish a model of impact. The results are crucial and will be used to base future logging regulations on.
This tree should normally be measured at 1.30 meters, but it was impossible to measure it at 1.30 meters because it was ribbed, so we couldn't get a measurement. Instead, we went up to 4.50 meters. At that height, at least the trunk is even.
67.6.
67.6. It's important because scientific studies predict what might happen in the future. Because today, man has gone into nature to destroy it. Without this kind of monitoring, we wouldn't know about it or be able to take steps. It's important because our monitoring and studies allow us to evaluate the forest.
It only takes a single day in the Congo rainforest. One day alongside the people of the forest, the guardians of its biodiversity and the pioneers who reinvent it, to realize it's not just a tropical timber reserve, but a heart beating to the rhythm of all who live within it. A handful of companies have understood that the sustainable exploitation of this forest means taking responsibility for the fate of the living world. They are still too few and far between. Only 10% of the logging industry has committed to respecting the labels of participative management. They must provide an example for the rest of the continent. But the respect of this distant land, that is the great African rainforest, also depends on our own lifestyle choices, here and now. The balance and survival of this immeasurable world heritage is at stake.